So a couple weeks ago, I was going into a McDonald's. I felt the need for some McDonald's French fries, so I head into McDonald's. I won't share with you the location in case you know someone who works there, but I go up and I make my order, and the total comes to $4.36. Now, I don't know about you, but I usually don't have any cash with me. I usually have to use my debit card because who carries cash anymore? But so I looked at my wallet. I had $10 cash. And I was like, maybe I have some change because I like exact change. Any of you guys with me on that? I'm obsessive compulsive about that actually. And so I get in my pocket, I look through my change, and I had a quarter, I had a dime and a nickel, which equals, I got you stumped there for a second. 40 cents there. First service was a little bit better than you guys. So I had $10, 40 cents. So I'm like, okay, that's enough. I don't like change. And so I give the cash register person their $10.40. And I think I confused him because he just looked at it for a second. Like, what are you doing? What are you giving me? And so I'm thinking in my mind, I've confused him. And before I say something, he says, it was actually only $4.34. You gave me too much money. And so now I'm thinking this guy's either stupid or he just is confused. And so I'm a pastor, so I try not to think anybody's stupid. And so I'm like, I try to explain it to him because I know, and I'm like, well, I don't like change and I'd rather you take the change, right? And so he still looked confused. And I said, I don't want change. And he said, oh, okay. And he gives me the 40 cents back, takes the $10 cash, puts it in his register, gives me 5 ones back, and then 60 cents. And I think, thank you very much. And I'm leaving, and I don't tell him this, but I'm like, is this what you learned at Hamburger University? I mean, come on. I mean, making change, I guess, for some people can be incredibly difficult. And so that's what this series that we're about, that we started last week is all about. It's called Making Change, and it's all about our money and our finances. Yes, right? Everyone wants to come and hear preach about money and finances because I never think about it, and I come to church to think about it, right? We are so excited, and I have to admit, just like I did last week, on the surface, this series seems a little bit boring or mundane or irrelevant, which could not be further from the truth, or maybe not as riveting or inspiring as some of the sermon series that we do around here. But I believe, like I said last week, that God really wants to do something in your heart during this series. And if you will commit to these 4 weeks, last week and the next 3 weeks, if you will truly commit to them, I believe God will do something in your heart. He will transform your heart. He will transform your life. He will transform your family's life. He will transform other people's lives, and He will transform your future. So what we've been doing in this series is we're looking at these mantras to live by, short phrases to memorize that we can understand how we want to live by. And I believe that if you were willing to embrace these 4 mantras, that you will experience freedoms in your finances like you never thought possible. Now, last week we started it off by doing the mantra, less is more. Say it with me. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Still not excited about that, right, from last week. But we took a look at that and what that really looks like, what that really means in our lives, that less is more. We debunked the myth that more is always better, because that's just not true. That's a myth. We looked at this guy named Solomon in the Bible who we're looking at throughout this whole series because he has incredible wisdom about finances and money. And we looked at how he once wrote these words. He says, better is a handful of tranquility and peace. That sounds nice, doesn't it? Better a handful of tranquility and peace than 2 handfuls of hard work and chasing the wind. In other words, Solomon is saying less is more. Now, if you weren't here last week, I want to encourage you to go to our website and check us out. You can watch the video online. It will get you up to speed of where we've been so far in this series. But today, we move on to the second mantra in this series, and the mantra is stress is bad. Okay, say it with me. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Now, some of you guys don't know this. Some of you have heard this story, but about 4 years ago, I am rushed into the emergency room in Elmhurst because my lips started bleeding and I could not get it to stop bleeding. And it freaked us out, and so I rushed to the hospital to figure out what was going on. They rushed me in. They put some gauze on my lips so that it would stop bleeding and it would sort of clot a little bit. And so they said, we need to run some tests. We need to check some things out. Let's look at it. And they finally look at it. They take some tests. And then all of a sudden, they come back about 30 minutes later, and they say, well, there is a blood vessel that burst in your lip. And that's probably from an old scar tissue that you had, which when I was little, I busted my lip wide open. And they said, we need to cauterize that. We need to get that blood vessel fixed, and we need to cauterize it. But the surgeon won't come in till Monday, so you're going to have to wait till Monday. And I said, okay. And actually, okay. And so he says, but you're not leaving the hospital. I'm like, what do you mean you're not leaving? I'm not leaving the hospital. He said, your blood pressure is way too high, like dangerously high. I'm like, what's my blood pressure? And he said, 230 over 165. Yeah, exactly. And now some of you guys are like, whoa, are you kidding me? And other of you, I have no idea if that's good or bad, right? And that's like, I didn't know if that was good or bad. And so I asked the doctor, is that good or bad? And he said, bad. Like really bad, like you really shouldn't be alive bad. You should be dead bad. And God was looking after me that night. If I hadn't gone with the stupid thing with my lip, I would have never known that I had high blood pressure. And by the way, that is incredibly high blood pressure. And so he says, you're going to have to stay here. And we're going to have to run some tests because you're young, you're not overweight, something's going on here. You shouldn't have this high blood pressure. So he started asking me all these questions. And he said, does anyone in your family have high blood pressure? I said, I don't think so. What do you eat? I said, well, I eat McDonald's every day because I love the guy who gives me the change every day. And I said, I don't really eat that well. And then he said, well, do you have a lot of stress in your life? And I'm like, I'm married, have 3 kids, and I'm a pastor. What do you think? I have a stressful job. And he said, well, stress is bad for you. I'm like, really? I didn't know that. Thank you, doctor. I've had helpful usage. Now I'm paying a lot of money for that advice. But I think we can all agree, like when we hear the doctor say stress is bad for you, all of us in this room, we say, you know what? Yeah, stress is bad. It does damage to our bodies. It does damage to our relationships. Stress is bad. But yet somehow we still allow stress into our lives and at many times rule our lives. Let me ask you this question. What is it that causes you the most stress in your life? Or what is causing you stress right now as you sit here this morning? Maybe it's your job and your job is just stressing you out. Maybe it's your family. Your kids are driving you crazy, or your in-laws or your distant relatives. They're driving you crazy and it's stressful all the time. Maybe for you it's your health, or maybe it's politics. I mean, everything with politics right now. Every time I hear about politics, I'm just stressed. Maybe for you, it's in traffic all the time on my commute. It just stresses me out. What causes stress for you in life? And my guess is most of us in here, somewhere in the mix of that is our money and our finances. Because let's face it, money is stressful, right? Paying bills, the right time, having enough money to save for whatever we want to save for in the future, retirement, vacation. It's stressful. Debt that we're carrying. Money is stressful. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being never, 10 being all the time, how would you rate how much stress you have about your money or finances right now? Like my guess is most of us in here, we would probably go somewhere between 6 and 10. We had someone first service said 11, right? I mean, that's how most of us feel about our money and our finances, especially when it comes to debt. We talked about last week, we read this verse in Proverbs chapter 22, verse 7. It says, the borrower is slave to the lender, Solomon says. Which means if you've ever borrowed money, whether it's from for a car, for a house, for a bank, a credit card, a family member, that means Solomon says you are in bondage to whatever or whoever you owe. Like debt enslaves you, even good debt, even debt that most of us wouldn't mind carrying, enslaves us. But what I was thinking this week is, it's not just debt that enslaves us. It's money in general, right? Our finances, they have the same power to enslave us. Like if we aren't careful, money will dominate our thinking every single day. It will control our attitude. It will direct our decisions and our actions every single day. And ultimately, where our money and finances leave us many times is depressed and overwhelmed and helpless and hopeless. But I'm here to tell you that I believe that God has a better way. God's plan for your money and for your finances is far better than you could ever imagine. Far greater. That God does not want you to be in bondage, specifically with your finances, with your money. I mean, just for a second, imagine what life would be like if you did not stress about money. Wouldn't that be awesome? Wouldn't that be incredible if you could just sit back and not have any stress about your money or your finances? Imagine for a second if one day your car breaks down and you don't have enough money to buy a new car. But imagine for a second that you don't panic because you have enough money to pay for the damages, to pay to repair it. Imagine what it would be like if you wanted something in life, you really wanted it, and it was expensive, but you've been wanting it, you've been saying, I want to get this, and you go and you actually pay cash for it. Like, you don't have to take out a loan, you don't have to worry about payments or interest rate, you just go in and lay some cash on. Imagine the feeling of that, how good that would feel. Imagine if someone in your life really needed help, they needed a hand up in life, and you could go to them and say to them, you know what, I really want to help you, here you go. Imagine what life could be like, stress-free from money. Now, if I haven't inspired you or motivated you on a practical level, I hope I will on a spiritual level. Because this isn't just a practical issue. When we talk about money and finances, it's also a spiritual issue. You see, Jesus once told this story, and this story was about this guy, this king, who was leaving his kingdom for a little while, and he entrusted his servants with all of his money. Okay, very generous, trusting king. He says, here, I need you to go invest it. And this whole story that Jesus tells, it's a symbolism of God entrusting each and every one of us with our financial resources. And at the end of this story, Jesus makes a bold statement. He says, if you are faithful with a little, then I will trust you with much. If you are faithful with a little, I will trust you with much, Jesus says. You see, living with financial integrity, with what God has entrusted to you, is actually a way that you and I get to serve and worship the God of the universe, our creator, our maker. What you do financially, make no mistake about it, what you do financially, how you spend your money, how you save your money, matters to God. Matters to God. So, how do you and we begin to go down this path and pursue this life that is stress-free of all of our money and our finances, even debt-free? How do we do that? Well, imagine if you had 3 hours over lunch with a billionaire. I mean, wouldn't that be awesome? Like, he had more money than Jeff Bezos. He had more savvy than Warren Buffett. More connections than Bill Gates. Imagine if you could sit down and glean some advice from this kind of billionaire. Well, the good news is the Bible gives us that. We've talked about him before, but Solomon, he had all the wisdom that he could ever want, and he had all the financial resources he could ever want. He was the wisest and wealthiest man ever on planet Earth. And there's this book in the Bible he writes called Proverbs, and he writes all these wise sayings. And this is a man who was given and granted all the wisdom he wanted, and he had all the wealth he wanted. And we get to sit at his feet and listen to him as he gives us some financial advice. For example, I think if he was up here today and you had an hour with him, one of the things he would say to all of us in this room is, you need to start choosing financial self-control. Choose financial self-control. Listen to what Solomon says in Proverbs chapter 25, verse 28. Listen to these words. He says this. He says, a person without self-control is like a city with broken down walls. A person without self-control is like a city with broken down walls. Now, I am not going political here, okay? So don't even go there with this. But in Solomon's day, you have to understand that a city without protective walls were vulnerable to their enemies. Like city walls in Solomon's day was the source of protection for a city. Without walls, a city in Solomon's day and its people were doomed for destruction. And Solomon, in all his wisdom, he compares a person who lacks self-control to a city that has compromised walls. See, a lack of self-control in my life and in your life makes us vulnerable to our enemy. And as we've talked about over and over again here at Journey, our enemy, my enemy, your enemy, we all share the same enemy, right? Your enemy isn't the boss that you can't stand, or the spouse that you're fighting with, or the Democrats or the Republicans or whoever it is. Those are not your enemies. The Bible says our enemy is Satan. And when you lack self-control, you open yourself up to all the attacks and the temptations and the schemes of your enemy, Satan. And this is no more true than with your money and your finances. The problem is, living inside each and every one of us is this 2-year-old little boy or this 2-year-old little girl. You know the little kid I'm talking about? Like some of you have a little kid in that age range. When you go to the grocery store, right? And this little kid wants everything down every aisle. The toy aisle, they come to the checkout and they see all those candy bars there. And I want that one, and I want that one, and I want that one, and I want that one. Like, you know what I'm talking about? Maybe that's still you today and you're like 55. I don't know. But 2-year-olds, they love doing that. A couple weeks ago, I was at Jewel Osco, and it happened to me. I was standing in line waiting to check out, and in front of me there was this gentleman there, and he had probably a 2-year-old kid, and he was pointing out every kind of ball. I want this one. Daddy, can I have that one and that one and that one? He just started taking them, and I was feeling a little frisky. And I was waiting. I didn't have anything else to do. And I looked at the little boy and said, yeah, let's get all of them, you know? I do not think the father appreciated that because he gave me a bad look, but I was in a good mood, so I wasn't going to let it bother me. But I think if Solomon were here today, he would say, listen, choose financial self-control. And I use that word choose carefully because it is all up to you. Like it is a decision that you and you alone have to make every single day. That's why the word is self-control. You cannot control anyone else in your life, and it comes on you. This is not on your spouse. This is not on your family or your kids or your boss. This is not on advertisers. If only they wouldn't tempt me with this picture or this image, I wouldn't feel tempted to go buy it. If only my boss would give me more money. You can't put this on anyone else. This is between you and God, choosing financial self-control. It means just because it's on sale doesn't mean you have to buy it. Just because it's a buy one, get one half off doesn't mean that you have to go and buy the second one. Just because it's a great deal and you think, man, I got some really low interest, I cannot pass this up, doesn't mean you have to go chasing down that carrot. Just because you can purchase something doesn't mean that you have to purchase it. Choose financial self-control. It means not letting your emotions get the better of you. Like, I don't know if you realize this or not, but your emotions, my emotions, they are our greatest threat. to financial freedom. Because here's what will often happen. I don't know about you, but here's what often happens in my life. I get sad or I get depressed and I get lonely or whatever, and I go out and buy myself something to make me feel good. I don't know if anybody else in this room's ever done that. Probably not. Maybe you're going through a good time and you're just happy. You get a raise at work, and so you go out to celebrate and you spend impulsively because now you have more money. I mean, our emotions are incredibly dangerous when they're not in check with our money and our finances. It could be any emotion. It could be whether you're hungry or angry or anxious or afraid. The problem is most of us as human beings, we either spend money trying to hide our emotions or trying to prolong our emotions. And when your emotions are running high, you need to have some self-control. Steve, I've tried. Man, I just love to spend money. I just can't control my money. I just can't do it. You'd be right. You can't do it. You can't have self-control. I can't either. The Bible actually says this. The Bible says in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7, it says, for God, listen, your creator, your maker, the God of the universe, for God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power and love and self-discipline. That means you and I, on our own, we can't have the discipline, we can't have the control to not mess things up financially for ourselves. But with the Spirit of God, God will enable you and God will empower you to make decisions that will benefit you in life. You just have to ask, pray. I do this all the time. I pray, God, not just in my finances, but all areas of my life. God, give me self-control. I cannot control this on my own. God, give me your spirit of power and love and self-discipline, so that you can say no for a little while, so that you can say yes for the rest of your life. See, that's where we really want to be with self-control. Say no for a little while so that you can say yes for the rest of your life. Like say no to that $5 cup of coffee from Starbucks every single day so that you can say yes maybe to store-bought coffee or gas station coffee so that later on you can say yes to any coffee you want. Say no to that brand new car. Say no to that brand new car smell that I love and drive your old one until it dies so that you can say yes for the rest of your life. Choose financial self-control. But Steve, it's too late. You don't know where I am financially. I am so messed up. I am upside down because of my lack of self-control. Start where you are right now. Don't worry about your past. Just start today and commit. I'm going to start saying no for a little while so I can say yes for the rest of my life. Your best financial days, I believe, are ahead of you if you are willing to listen to God and His truth. So choose financial self-control. Here's another thing that I think if Solomon was here today, he'd give us some advice. He would say, pursue financial understanding. Pursue financial understanding. In Proverbs chapter 27, verse 23, look at what he says. He says, know the state of your flocks and put your heart into caring for your herds. For riches don't last forever, and the crown might not be passed to the next generation. Now, I've said this before, but in Solomon's day, they didn't have stocks like we do today. They have flocks. And flocks were a lot of money was in the flocks. Sheep meant a lot of money, okay, back in those days. And so a very successful shepherd in Solomon's day would have known how many sheep he had. Let's say a successful shepherd would have had 10,000 sheep. He would have been incredibly wealthy with those sheep. But I guarantee you, he would have known how many sheep he had, and he would have known the characteristic and condition of each of those sheep. He would have known this sheep they tend to get lost a lot, or they go on their own way, or this sheep I need to check out because it seems sick. A good, successful shepherd would have known his financial his financial condition of his sheep. And that would have meant all the difference in the world back in Solomon's day. See, here's what Solomon's trying to get at for you and for me is you have to have a solid understanding of all your financial situations. And if you don't understand your financial situation, you might just lose it. Now, I have to tell you something. I am not a financial expert. Not even close. Probably most of us in this room, we are not financial experts. In fact, I grew up, my dad never taught me about money, how to handle money, how to deal with money. In fact, my dad was horrible at money. I loved my dad, and he great. And he taught me two things, God and sports. But he did not tell me about money, and he was horrible at money. So needless to say, there's been a huge learning curve for me in my life about how to handle my finances. Most of us will probably have similar stories. Unfortunately, most of us, we just do not understand how our finances work, or at least how our finances should work. We've never been taught, we've never been told, and that's a problem. So let me just ask you some simple questions that will help sort of gauge where you are with understanding your finances. How well do you know your finances? Here's some easy ones. How much income do you bring in every year? Not just you, but your family. If you're married or you have kids living at home, how much income is coming into your household on a monthly, yearly basis? What do you spend money on? Where does all your money go? I counsel people all the time, and they have no clue where their money is being spent. At the end of the month, we just know that we don't have any, right? Or we don't know where it's all going, but it's going. How much do you owe on loans and credit cards, mortgages, car payments? How much are you paying interest on each of those loans? Do you know if that's a good interest rate or a bad interest rate? See, if you're in the dark with any of these questions, you're setting yourself up for financial failure. See, according to Solomon makes it clear. He says, you can't manage what you don't know. The only reason the shepherd is successful because he knows his sheep. He knows how many he has. He knows the condition of his sheep. And Solomon says, listen, you can't be in the dark when it comes to your finances. And if you are married, this includes both of you. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. If you are married and you say, well, wait a minute, Steve, I do all the finances. I don't need my spouse to know everything. I take the weight of paying the bills and knowing all that. You need to get your spouse in the light. Your spouse should not be in the dark. Part of being married is being one, and that includes your financial situation. Even if it's bad, even if it doesn't look pretty, bring both of you into the light, because when it comes to your finances, ignorance is not bliss. And Solomon says you need to know and understand your financial situation. Like here's the issue that most of us are asking in our culture today. When we go and we make a big purchase, the two questions that our culture is asking more than anything else is, how much down and how much are the payments? Right? Those are the two magical questions when we're buying something expensive. Those are the wrong questions to ask. The right question to ask is, how much is the total cost going to be? Like just say, for example, you have $16,000 in debt. Maybe it's from a credit card, car loan, mortgage, whatever it is, and you're paying $250 a month at 19% interest. And if you think that's high, most credit cards can go a lot higher than that. If you have that debt and you're paying only $250 a month at that percentage of interest, you're going to end up taking 40 years to pay off that debt. And at the end of those 40 years, you're going to end up paying $105,000 in interest. Do you understand your finances? You take that same $16,000 of debt and make it money that you have, cash that you have. I know that might be a stretch for some of you, but let's just say you have $16,000 and not in debt, but you have that just in the bank. If you take that money and you invest it today, you go home and you invest it today and you don't add anything to it, and you gain a common interest rate of 12% each year over that same 40 years that you would have to take to pay off that debt, over that 40 years, that would end up being $1.5 million. Pursue financial understanding, whatever it takes. Have some conversations with your spouse or with your family. Seek some financial advice from a financial advisor. We have several people in the church who do that for a living. But you've got to pursue your financial understanding, Solomon says. Here's the last thing I think that we have time for today, that Solomon, if he were here today, and we could glean from this billionaire, is create a financial plan. Create a financial plan. Steve, I don't want to do the work, we just like to wing it. If there's money left over, we'll have enough money. We just like to just go with the flow of our financial situation. Solomon said that's a huge mistake. You need a financial plan. Listen to what he says in Proverbs chapter 21, verse 5. Listen to these words. He says, good planning and hard work lead to prosperity, but hasty shortcuts lead to poverty. The man who had all the wisdom in the world, all the resources he wants, good planning and hard work lead to prosperity, but hasty shortcuts lead to poverty. See, here's the problem. We live in a prosperous, craving culture that is settling for hasty shortcuts. And sooner or later, that will catch up with you. So we want the financial blessings and we want the financial securities and we want the financial rewards without the hard work and without the planning. It just doesn't work that way. Someone once told me, and I'll never forget it, a pastor friend of mine said, you can always wander into debt, but you can never wander out of debt. I love that. You can always stumble into debt, but you can never stumble out of debt. You can always mistake your way into financial trouble or financial issues, but you can never mistake your way out of it. Create a financial plan. I think that's what the story that Jesus was telling us is, you can't be good stewards of what God has entrusted to you without a plan. He recommends and he highlights the two that had a plan in Jesus' story of the king and the servants. He rewards the two servants, but the servant who didn't have a plan, even though he saved him that one talent, he condemns him for it. Create a financial plan. There's three things, and this isn't on your notes. This isn't going to be up on the screen, so you might want to write it down or memorize it. Three things I think you need to create a financial plan with is, number one is create a plan for your debt. And more importantly, to pay off your debt. Do you have a plan? Or are you just playing the minimum game of paying the minimum and hoping that someday you pay it off? Have a plan for your debt. How are you going to pay it off? How are you going to reduce the interest rate? Create a plan for that. Another is plan for your spending. Get with your family, get with your spouse and say, this is, we've got to have a plan on how we're going to spend and how we're going to make decisions about what to spend on and what not to spend on. And then plan for your savings. The average family in Japan saves about 20% of their income. The average family in Europe saves about 15% of their income. The average American family saves less than 1% of their income. In fact, the average family in America, research shows, has less than $250 in savings. Now, I'm not saying that to shame us or guilt us. That's not who we are here at Journey. But it lets us know how important it is to plan your savings. Steve, I don't have enough money. Like, I have no money to save right now. Saving has nothing to do with how much you have. It's about this habit that you develop in your life. Even if you have $5, say, I have $5 to save this month, then save it. Just get in the habit of saving. And then as you can add to that. But just get in the habit of saving something. Listen, again, this isn't just a practical issue that we're talking about today. It's a spiritual one. Jesus understood this. That's why when Jesus says, listen, don't worry about those things. Don't let your finances or money. In Matthew chapter 6, he says, don't let those things stress you out, because that's bad. Here's what you need to do, Jesus says, in Matthew chapter 6. It says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. The heart of what Jesus is saying here is, listen, the world worries about money and finances. Your friends, your boss, your neighbor, they all stress about money. You don't need to stress about money. All you need to do, Jesus says, is seek first the kingdom of God, and everything will be taken care of. You see, whenever we start to do what's right, to pursue God, to put him first, to seek him, to work his plan, it's amazing how God always comes through. I've seen it in my life over and over again. It's amazing how God will bless our faithfulness. It's amazing how fast our God can bring us out of financial debt as we take the right steps toward him, as we begin to see a significant change in our lives, especially when it comes to our finances. And Jesus comes to you, and he comes to me this morning. He says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened and stressed to the max when it comes to your finances, and I will give you rest. I will give you peace. I will give you tranquility. I will change your perspective on everything in your life if you love me, Jesus says. I will change your perspective on everything, and that includes your money and your finances. Stress is bad. Freedom is awesome. Let's make a change. Will you pray with me? Father, we thank you for the person of Solomon, who had everything that a person could want. And you granted him wisdom. So thousands of years later, people like us living in 21st century America can come and glean from his wisdom from you. God, I pray that this doesn't fall on deaf ears today, that we would truly be challenged and stretched and encouraged, that no matter where we are in our financial situation, that God, if we live by your standards and by your plan for our money and our finances, you will bless it. You will provide for us. You will come through all the time. God, whatever we need to hear today, speak to each and one of us right where we sit. You know our situations. You know our finances. God, move in us. Speak to us. Give us your truth and what we need to hear today. God, again, I thank you for your son, Jesus, who promises us peace and joy, even in the midst of financial chaos. May we follow your son, Jesus. May we look to him for respite in life. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.